And record, and we are live. Hello, everybody, and good morning. Happy Monday. I hope you all have your coffee and you're enjoying it. Cheers. Today, we are going to talk about the past and how the past affects us today. Um, it's a good idea to have your journal for today's class. And then after this class, we're going to do a meditation. That meditation will be a past life exploration, and you will also need your journal for that. So get your journals out. Um, a quick little opening. So I have studied with Dolores Cannon, who is the teacher of QHHT, which is Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technology. So she is absolutely a phenomenal person, and she explores past lives. She's taught people how to do these sessions all around the world, and collected information and written several books about it and about the experiences. I highly recommend to look them up if you're, especially if you're a reader. Super amazing books, super great information there. Dolores Cannon, you can look her up. I am certified as a level 1 with Dolores Cannon. I did not go further with my certification for the purpose of to do the QHHT sessions. They're very involved, and you can only really help about one person a day because these sessions take 4 to 8 hours. They're very in depth, they're very high energy, and it's really a lot. And so for me, that's not really where I wanted to go with my with the information that I had learned. I do enjoy doing the sessions, but I like to do this style a little bit more, where we can work with more people and help more people reach their goals and explore themselves and learn why they are the way they are. So Dolores Cannon is a big contributor to a lot of the information that we're going to be exploring and working with. Um, Another person I studied under after I started learning the past life regressions with Dolores Cannon is Amy Robeson. She does Akashic Records work. And what the Akashic Records are is that is like the book of life, basically. That is your record of everything past, present, and the infinite possibilities of the future. And so she teaches people how to go in and access your Akashic Records and start working with your higher self to discover and, get that connection and, to grow as a person, right? And so Amy Robeson is super amazing. She is so kind and so sweet and just so loving. So if you want to explore her some more, she has an amazing website. I think we got it posted on Gypsum.com. You can get to her website. She offers a variety of classes and stuff too, but she also does a whole lot of free work that she does different meditations, and she's just super amazing. So I also went through a certification class with her to be able to teach Akashic Records, and got my certification through Amy Robeson. But again, that focuses more on just the Akashic Records, and it's a very in-depth process when you're working one-on-one. So what I've done is kind of collectively put the information that I've learned together, and I kind of have my own style of doing it that does pull a little bit from the places that I've learned and the things that I've experienced and learned myself. um, the other two people that are very influential as far as my mindset and where this information comes from is Dolores Cannon's daughter, Julia Cannon. She has a book called The Soul Speak. um Soul Speaks, I have it right here. Soul Speak, the language of your body. This is a book I 1,000,000% recommend each and every one of you to read. This is absolutely amazing. It's called Soul Speak, The Language of Your Body by Julia Cannon. So that is Dolores Cannon's daughter. And that book talks about how the things going on with our body are a sign from your higher self. So for example, if you are constantly having headaches, right? Maybe in one of your past lives, you died from a traumatic head injury. Okay. So until you discover where that's coming from, you're going to keep having that headache because that's your soul saying, hey, you need to know about this. Hey, you need to know about this. And it's a constant reminder until you go in and you do the work necessary. It can also be signs in other ways, like say you keep stubbing your toe. Okay. And that could be a sign that and if it's on your dominant side, then that's something to do with the past in this life or something that's going on in this life currently. If it's on the left side of your body, it a lot of times relates to something from a past life. So say you keep stubbing your toe on your right foot, right? That's not an accident that that's happening. What's happening is that's your soul trying to connect with you and telling you, hey, you're not going the right direction. You need to turn around. You know, you keep stubbing your toe. There's a reason for that. So this book really goes through and talks about all the different ailments that we can have and what they can be trying to tell us. It talks about cancer. It talks about abscess. It talks about addiction. All the things you can think of are in there and how they can be helping us to what they're trying to tell us, what those things are trying to tell us. So super influential person in my studies and the information that I'm presenting to you. And the other one is Edgar Casey. Edgar Casey is known as the dream prophet, right? And he would go to sleep and just have these crazy dreams. And he saved thousands of people's lives because he would go into these dream states and figure out what was going on with them from a health perspective. So say somebody's sick and they're dying and there's no reason for it. He would go in and then he would wake up from his session and he would say, oh, they just need some magnesium. He'd give them some magnesium, they'd get up and walk away just fine. And I mean, but like unreal situations, where people were given toe tags and then he would say, nope, it's just this. And he would just, from his dreams. And so he is a really fascinating person to look into. So Dolores Cannon, Amy Robison, Julia Cannon, Edgar Casey. Those are the four main people that I have studied a lot under, and a lot of their work and a lot of their information. So that's kind of the background as to where this information that we're getting ready to get into is coming from, and some resources for you guys if you want to go explore, more in depth and see what they have to say themselves. Um, so what is a past life, right? And how is that relevant? Well, it's some people are looking for fame. They're like, oh, in my past life, it must have been just, for example, I don't like to clean. I'm horrible at house cleaning. So, I could be like, oh, well, in my past life, I must have been a queen and somebody followed me around and cleaned everything up all the time. All right. But that's not really what we're looking for. It's not about what you were or you were not. Okay. It's about the experiences that we've had and how they relate to today. So, maybe I don't like to clean because I've never had to before. Doesn't matter if I was a queen or if I was a peasant and just didn't have to clean because my job was to, you know, train the horses or something. So we get these ideas in our head that we're looking for something, glorious and fabulous to just make sense of everything. And that's not necessarily what it is. It's more about the experiences that we've had and understanding how they affect us today. Um, Julia Cannon talks about it's not hidden. This is not hidden information. It's just information we're not taught to access. So, the whole idea in exploring past lives is learning how to access that information. Um, your soul has been learning lessons across many, many lifetimes. Okay. And you got to think like if Earth is the school, so you got to think we're this ball of energy. We're this collective ball of energy. And As a collective ball of energy, there's no feeling there. You don't know what it's like to sip on your coffee. You don't know what it's like to have a conversation with somebody. You don't know what it's like to love somebody or to lose somebody. You don't know the good or the bad, right? So, as that collective conscious energy, we decided we need experiences. We need to be able to experience things. And so we set up these different places to go to have experiences. So we have Earth, right? And let's imagine Earth is a college. Earth is a school. All right. So we sign up and we say, yep, I'm going to go to Earth. Now, in one lifetime, it is absolutely not possible to experience everything that Earth has to offer. All right. Um, it's just not. There's so many different experiences to have on Earth, and when we live at very best, we get 100 years, right? It's really not possible to live all those experiences in one lifetime. So we have to come back for multiple lifetimes. And so just like college, college has got its set structure. You got 4 years for the general run of college. All right. So say you go to college and you take your math class and you fail that math class. You have to take it again. All right. Earth works the same way. So when you come down into your body and you have your lessons for this life, if you don't learn those lessons, then you have to come back and repeat those lessons. And those lessons are going to keep presenting themselves to you until you learn it and understand it. Now, some people might get the lesson in the first lifetime. It might take some people 20 lifetimes to get the lesson. It's not necessarily good or bad that it takes people shorter or longer. It just is a different understanding of that lesson. How deep are you getting into that lesson? And some things just don't click for some people. So they might have to learn that lesson 20 different ways before they fully get it. Some people might understand the fullness of it in the first try, right? But just like college, if we don't pass the class, we have to take it again. So you can think of Earth and our lives here that we come here the same as like the human body and human age, right? So when you first sign up for Earth school and you come to Earth, you start out as a baby, right? Just like a baby is born as a human body. So your first few lives here on Earth are going to be baby lives. Those are going to be the people that you talk about their whole life. They're like, they act like a child, man. They can't pay their bills on time. They just can't figure anything out. Well, that's because their soul is brand new here on earth. So, of course, they can't pay their bills every day. Do you expect your 1-year-old to pay its bills on time every month? No, they're still learning how to walk and talk, right? So these baby souls that are here for the first time, those are the ones that are really going to struggle with just the basic things. And everybody's just like, dude, come on, those are your baby souls. And then we got the kid souls, and then we got the teenage souls, and the teenage souls, those are the ones that you're going to see that are just a really good description of teenage souls is the really sexually active ones. The people that can't make a commitment their whole life, they're into, they're just very sexually driven and they have lots of partners, and it's just like a teenager. Their hormones are spiked, right? Well, they don't grow out of that because that is where they're at as a soul. Their soul is in that teenage hormonal stage, where that is the focus of their lessons, has to do with that sexuality, right? And then we move into, the um 20s and 30s, and those souls are the ones that maybe they don't quite got it all figured out, but they got an idea. They understand the basics. They know how to pay their bills. There still might have some struggles in there, but they're kind of figuring it out. They're figuring out what their passions are. They're figuring out, you know, where they're going with this life and where they're going in this world. And then you get the old souls that have been back to earth millions of times, hundreds of times or whatever. And those are going to be your teacher souls. Those are going to be the people that you meet that just seem to know the things, Um, they just kind of have that understanding. And you're like, What is that? Well, that's because they've already been to Earth and experienced these lessons and already have the understanding of the lessons. So you can look at your own self and your own life, and you can see what some of the experiences you've had in your past lives are based on where you're at now. So right now, if you think about something that you're just naturally really good at, like, maybe it's cooking, for example, right? Maybe you're really good at cooking and it just comes natural to you, and everything that you make is just amazing. And you make these, all these wonderful meals and these wonderful dishes and stuff. Well, this isn't your first lifetime cooking. If it was your first lifetime cooking, you'd be struggling. This is something you've already worked on. This is something you've already practiced. This is something that you came into this life already having an understanding of. So you can look around in your own world and your own life, and you can kind of see those things that just come natural to you that you just have that understanding of. That's because you've already lived another life or two or 10 or 20 working on that trait, working on that ability that you have. So those are going to be like, my other half, for example. He is a master craftsman. That man made a canoe with pine boards, like unreal. How many people can just do that? This is not his first life working with those tools and working with wood. He came into this life with that understanding already. um we all have that. We all have the things we've already learned, right? And if you come into this life and you really don't have any of that, then it's not a bad thing either. That just means that this is one of your first lives here on earth. Now, we see a lot of those first lives, those first few lives, those baby souls. That's also where we see a lot of the youth right now that is struggling with their identity, and they are struggling with suicidal ideations. They don't want to be here. They don't understand Earth. It's heavy. It's complicated. Those are baby souls. Not that their soul is a baby, it's just that it's a baby to Earth, okay? Because there's other schools out there and there's other places our souls can go to learn things. But just like college, once you sign up for Earth, you're stuck here until you graduate, right? So it's not that their soul itself is a baby, it's just that they're a baby coming to Earth. So a lot of those new souls, those baby souls coming in, those are the ones that we're seeing that are really struggling with those, being here, being on Earth, man. It's so heavy, it's so hard. The air is thick. We have to breathe, we have to feel, we have to do things. And it's not necessarily like that when we exist as an energetic ball of energy. Um, so it's really interesting, the past life regressions. Like I said, Dolores Cannon teaches them, and people have done sessions from all around the world, from all different backgrounds and religions, and this information is coming back pretty standard across the board. We're doing these regressions on these kiddos and stuff, and we're getting the same answers, we're getting the same responses from people that have grown up on the complete opposite sides of the world, that have never connected with each other, that have never spoken to each other, that have different belief systems, and we're getting these same answers. And so when you start looking into that, it really does add a lot of validity to it. Instead of it just being a concept, we're seeing that information coming out that really adds a lot of validity to that. So you have to be mindful when you're dealing with yourself and the people around you that we're all in a different stage of our existence here on earth. All right. From that baby soul all the way up to that old soul that's been on earth for thousands of years. Everybody's in a different spot. So we have to stop judging people and, like, well, they're never going to figure it out. They're never going to be able to pay their bills on time. And we have to start looking at how we can support them. And that doesn't mean paying their bills for them. Again, those boundaries exist. Um, but just be mindful that this could be their first life on earth. Of course it's going to be heavy and hard. We have to help guide them to get through it. And sometimes what humans would call worst case scenario happens, and they go ahead and end their life early. Well, as a human, that can be a hard concept to grasp. But what really happens is they get to go back to that energetic state and they get to reset themselves, they get to refresh themselves, and they get to come back and they get to try again. So it's not the end of all. It's not necessarily the ideal situation, but it is something that they needed, and sometimes it is just too much for them. So you have to remember not to be accountable for that also. We cannot control what other people decide to choose. Okay. Um, so how our past affects us throughout these lifetimes. We come to learn all these lessons. And so what happens is as we're learning these lessons, we're coming back to earth. And so let me think of a good example. Okay, I'm going to use the headache example again because it's just on my mind today. So, say that you notice a pattern in your life and excuse me, you're constantly having headaches. And this is actually a reference to a session that I have done with somebody. And she had had headaches her whole life, just horrible headaches, migraines, debilitating, right? Like the kind that put you out. She had gone to the doctor multiple times. They'd given her several pills. They kind of helped, but the headaches kept coming back. Okay. Well, so when we did her session, we went into her past life regression session. We did her session, and she went back to a place where she was a little boy that had escaped from a slavery ship on like a little dinghy boat, just a little dinghy boat out in the ocean, and got stuck in a storm, and that boat washed up on shore, and she was a little boy and hit his head on a rock and was just on a desert island somewhere, no other humans around, and laid there for days and days and days until he had finally bled out and died, right? But nobody was there. Nobody got to see what happened to this little boy. This little boy just escaped off this ship, and this is what happened. So then when we moved on into speaking with her higher self, I said, why were we shown this? And she said, well, she wants to know why she has headaches. And so um it's like, okay, so she has headaches, and she said that little boy felt like there was no closure, that his family and friends and nobody knew what happened to him, and he just ended up on that island bleeding out, and he wanted somebody to know. So throughout her whole life, she had had these debilitating headaches, right? And then we asked, how do we stop these headaches from happening? And her higher self said to acknowledge and uh not appreciate, but acknowledge that that little boy existed and that he had lost his life from bleeding out, and to honor him through meditation and see if that doesn't help her headaches go away. Well, about a month and a half later, I called her and she said, or she called me and she said, I just realized something. And I said, what's that? And she said, well, it's been about 3 weeks since I've had to take a migraine pill. And so her whole life, she was really struggling with these headaches, and what it really was it was her past life that didn't get the closure it wanted, so it brought it into this life. Okay, so this can happen via past lives, and it can also happen with things from our past in this current life. So if you look at the patterns that are going on in your life and the things that are happening in your life, and your health and how your health is going in this life, it can really point you to what the bigger problem is. Okay. Because it's very seldom just a surface problem. Um, and that's where that Soul Speaks book will start to help you a lot. You start looking into, well, why do I have cancer? Cancer is a really good one. It's thought that the majority of people that have cancer don't want to deal with the lessons that they were supposed to deal with in this lifetime. So rather than taking the time to learn these lessons, they brush them off. They go around the lesson. They don't take time to learn the lesson, and they're just looking for a way out. So they develop cancer. And it's really interesting because when you look into the cancer world and you meet those survivors, the majority of those survivors of cancer are going to tell you that when they got to the very bottom and they thought their life was over, that's when they made the biggest changes in the world, right? That's when they noticed that I need to make some changes. That's when they did some soul searching and they completely changed their life a complete 360. And those are the ones that you see have those survival rates because what happened was they went in and looked at where is this problem coming from? Okay, so and it doesn't just have to be health related. This can be in our relationships that we're in. You know, if you find yourself in a toxic relationship and that toxic relationship finally ends, and then you get into another relationship, and boom, there it is again. That same toxicity is happening again. And then, you go on down the road and you come back to next relationship, same toxicity is happening again. Well, why is that? There's a lesson there from your past that you're not learning. So there's something that you have to acknowledge and you have to learn and you have to start implementing to be able to move on from this. So we also get into karma, right? And karma's a fun one. Um, we have to repay debts when we do things wrong. All right. And if you can think through human history and the couple thousand years that we have documented, and then you think about how we are all born to learn these lessons and we go through these lives, it's pretty easy to assume that at some point in time, you've done somebody wrong with ill intention, right? At some point in time throughout those lives, you've done something that was not with good intention. It's a very easy thing to assume pretty much all of us have done at some point or another. So when we come into this life, we have to take care of that karma. We have to repay that debt, whatever that looks like. So maybe in a past life, you were a very mean person and you were constantly belittling somebody that was in your world, and you were constantly making them feel like they were worthless, that they were no good, that they were just horrible, and you might have even been physically violent to them. You've got some karma you're going to have to repay for that experience. Now, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person because of it. That just means you got to learn that lesson that it's not okay to treat people that way. So, in this life, that karma is going to come back to you. And you might find yourself in a situation where somebody's treating you that way and you don't like it. And it's very hurtful. And it's a very hard thing to deal with. And you have to then understand that, okay, so this is something that's happening cause and effect. This is a past experience that I now need to learn to understand to be able to move forward. All right. Because just because you do something bad and you have karma to repay doesn't mean you have to continue to repay that karma for all of eternity. That means you have to understand and learn that lesson and accept that lesson for what it is. So in that specific example of being in the situation where somebody's belittling you, once you fully understand that this is not acceptable and this is not an okay behavior, and I will not in this lifetime or any lifetime going forward treat somebody in that manner. And I'm setting the boundary that I will no longer allow someone to treat me that way. That's when you reach that full understanding of what that lesson is. And you're then able to move on past that and move on to what's next, to what your next lesson is. Um, Birthmarks can also be indicators of our past lives. I have somebody that came in one of the sessions that I did that has this weird rash type thing on his knee on his left side. And it's just this really weird, like he's been to the doctor multiple times throughout his life. They've given him different creams and stuff. They've never been able to figure out what it is. And sometimes it'll itch really bad. And so he's like, I want to do this lesson because I want to figure out what this thing is on my knee. And it went across the top of his knee and then across the back side of his knee. It wasn't on the sides, it was on the top and the bottom. not on the sides, right? Just this really random weird rash. So we do his past life exploration, and he was in a boat and he was fishing, and his wife accidentally hooked a shark, and they couldn't get the shark unhooked, and it got tangled up on the boat and it pulled the boat in the water, and the shark grabbed a hold of him by his leg and drowned him. And so when we asked why did we go to this place, his higher self said to heal. And so when we asked what he needs to know, his higher self said that he needed to know that his wife was okay. All right. And so then after he wakes up, we talk about it, and I send him his recording of the session and everything. And a couple months goes by and I run into him at the grocery store and he says, "You know what's really interesting?" And I said, "What's that?" And he lifted his shorts up a little bit and he said, "Look at my knee." That rash was gone. Hasn't come back still to this day. And that was about 5 years ago. Something he had fought with for his whole life. And what it came down to was that, he needed to know his wife was okay. He was drug under by that shark, and he was so concerned about his wife and how she turned out that that experience followed him into this lifetime because he was still concerned about if his wife was okay or not. So once we did that regression and we did that session and we went back and we learned what had happened to his knee and that his wife was in fact okay, it went away. It was gone. So all the main point to all this is all these things that we experience in this life, they are not random. We don't have random experiences. We have very calculated experiences that help us to meet the lessons where we're at as a soul coming through these classes, coming to earth, having these experiences. These things that we have happen throughout our lives are indicators that this is where we need to be looking. So a full past life set, yes. So there's a variety of different ways to do it. What we're going to do today is not going to be a full hypnosis session. So in order to do a full hypnosis session and a full regression with someone, that has to be an in-person experience. We can't do that with technology for a variety of reasons. If it kicks you out in the middle of that session and I have you in a hypnotic state, that can leave you in a really fucked up way. How are you supposed to navigate that if I'm not there to help you navigate that anymore? So we can't depend on electronics and technology to do those sessions safely, really. You can do more damage than good. So the type of sessions that we'll be doing here through technology are going to be, there's a slight hypnotic state that is involved in that, um, but it's not that deep hypnosis that we do when we're doing the regressions. So these are more exploration than regression. Okay. We can't go that deep into a hypnotic state via technology. We just can't do that. That has to be an in person thing. Um, but what we can do is we can get a very good experience and we can get a lot of insight and we can start learning how to access those records, those Akashic records, and those experiences and the things that you need to know, um, via just a slight hypnotic state. So, what we'll do when we do this session is, I'm going to walk you through basically a meditation. So, and you'll use your journal. And I'll prompt you, okay, go ahead and write this down. And that's when you'll write down, um, most people describe these sessions when they're done, they remember it and everything, but more like a dream state is really the most common description I get when we're talking about how these sessions feel. So to tell you what to expect is it's more like a dream state, kind of like a daydream because you're conscious during We're not going that deep into a hypnotic state that you're not really conscious anymore. But a lot of people after the session, they get up and you kind of feel light and you kind of feel weird. It's a very, I want to almost say, unsettling experience for a lot of people because this is never what you expect it to be. All right. Your higher self is going to give you the information that you need to make the next right step in your life. And a lot of times that's a very emotional thing. It can bring on really big feelers. And it might be something pops up that you didn't want to pop up. Okay. We don't get to pick and choose. We get what we need to help heal and move forward with our lives. So, I just want you guys to really be prepared for that. And that unsettled kind of feeling starts to make sense and it kind of starts to fade into this understanding that you didn't really know you could have. So, um, it really is just a completely different experience than what if you've never done a past life exploration or regression, there's nothing else in this world that even compares to that. And it's kind of harder to explain much more than that. It's just, I like everybody to be prepared. Like for example, if you're going to your kids birthday party this afternoon at school, and you got to go people and be in a good mood and stuff, it's not a good idea to do that regression right now because it's going to put you in a strange mindset for the rest of the day. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing. It's a very healing thing, but don't do it before you need to go be upbeat and positive and you got these other things to do and make sure you've got the time for self to process what we do during the session. Um, so if you're not in a great spot to do the session when we do it here in about 10-15 minutes, then you are still welcome to listen to the session. And believe it or not, you're going to get a little bit out of it, even if you're not actively participating. Maybe like I know Corby babysits a lot. So even if she's got a million kids running around and she can't sit down and really focus on it, you're still going to get something out of it just by listening. So don't be afraid to listen, but don't sit down and really get into it until you're in a good spot for self. So, because you might end up crying for a couple hours, or and it doesn't always go that way, but it does sometimes. So, just be prepared for the unexpected to happen is what I want to say, and make sure you're ready for that, and you don't have any. I don't want it to mess up the rest of your day. So, if you need to wait and come back and do this later in the evening or whatever works for you, um, the replay will work just as well as the first time. All right, because it's an energetic state of being and when I'm doing this video and this recording, I am putting my energy into this video. So you guys are going to get that energy back out of it, whether you're watching it live or you're doing the replay 5 years from now. That energy is still going to exist in that space for you. Um, so do do we have any questions about any of that? And then we're going to take a short little break and then we'll get into the meditation. No questions? All right, let me stop this real quick.